Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel for another midweek mystery video. Today we're going to be covering two different deaths. The death of 6-year-old Max Shacknai and 32-year-old Rebecca Zahau. Now these deaths are linked, but to start the story we're going to talk about Max. Max was a happy, carefree 6-year-old boy when he died in 2011. His two parents, Jonah Shacknai and Dina Romero, were actually divorced. They'd got divorced in 2008 following what seemed like a tumultuous marriage. There were allegations of physical abuse on both sides of the marriage, and it kind of just came to an end. Jonah and Dina remained civil for the sake of Max, and they actually co-parented very well. Now Jonah Shacknai was and is still very, very wealthy. He was the CEO of Medicus Pharmaceuticals and had a lot of money. For most of the year the family lived in Arizona, with Dina and Jonah living just a few blocks apart from each other for the sake of Max. However, Jonah and his family vacationed a lot in Coronado Beach in California at Spreckles Mansion. Now Jonah had actually been married twice before, once to Max's mother Dina, and he had a previous marriage before that through which he had 2 other children. So that summer they were vacationing at Spreckles Mansion, Jonah and his 3 children, and Jonah's girlfriend Rebecca. Now Rebecca was 32 years old, and her and Jonah had been together for 2 years at the time of Max's death, so they were in a very serious relationship. And apparently Rebecca absolutely adored Max. They got on really, really well. Now Rebecca was originally from Burma. She was a Burmese immigrant, and her entire family had actually moved over to the United States many years beforehand. And Rebecca had been married before she was with Jonah as well. Like I said, they were all vacationing at Spreckles Mansion in Coronado, and they also had Rebecca's younger sister, 13-year-old Zena, with them. On July 11th, 2011, Jonah was dropping his 2 older children at the airport so they could fly back to their mother, and then on the way back he stopped at the gym. Whilst he was at the gym, he got a hysterical phone call from Rebecca saying that Max had hurt himself. Max had fallen 2 stories over the banister in the Spreckles Mansion. He was found sprawled on the first floor. He had facial injuries and a spinal cord injury. The big mystery here is how nobody saw Max fall. At the time of his fall, Zena was in the shower in a bathroom on the 2nd floor, and Rebecca was in the bathroom on the 1st floor, and she said that she came running as soon as she heard Max scream. But there's also been reports that she said she came running when she heard her dog Ocean start barking. Rebecca said that when she arrived at Max's side, he was lucid, he was talking, and he was calling out for Rebecca's dog Ocean. However, by the time paramedics arrived, Max was totally unconscious and he wasn't breathing. Now it's important to note here that Max wasn't a daredevil child. His entire family have said that he was a very cautious child, and he wasn't the type of kid to go throwing himself off banisters for the fun of it. He was quite careful. However, when the paramedics arrived, Max was lying on the floor with his scooter by his legs, making it seem like he had gone over the top of the banister with his scooter in hand. There were also many soccer balls around, and the chandelier was broken. I saw some reports saying the chandelier was actually lying next to him as if he had grabbed it on the way down and pulled off the ceiling. But I also saw other reports saying that the chandelier was still attached to the ceiling, it was just broken. However, Max had no cuts on his hand, as you would expect if he's gone over the banister and has tried to grab onto this, what I'm assuming is glass chandelier. So of course immediately Rebecca calls out to her sister Zena to call the paramedics, and she calls 911, and Zena stays on the phone with the paramedics until they arrive. At the very end of the phone call, when the paramedics are there, Zena goes towards the door to open it, and you can hear Rebecca in the background of the phone call shout, "Don't open that door," which of course in itself is very, very strange. Now we don't know for certain that the door that Rebecca is referring to is the front door where the paramedics are. Why would Rebecca not want Zena to open the front door to the paramedics when there's a boy lying unconscious on the floor? There's been a lot of speculation that Rebecca did actually say this, but she was referring to the front door. Maybe she was referring to the door of a room in which he's kept the dog. I can imagine that the dog was barking, causing a lot of extra stress. So Rebecca maybe hid him away in a room, and maybe Zena went to open the door and Rebecca said don't open it. Maybe she said go open the door instead of don't open the door. I can see how when it's on a phone call and the person saying it isn't the one directly speaking to the speaker, sounds could get distorted. So although it definitely sounds like she said don't open the door, we can't take that for gospel. But there's also the possibility that Rebecca said this because she was busy covering up what had happened and hadn't quite finished what she was doing yet. First responder later testified at an inquest into Max's death that when he arrived at the scene, Rebecca was just repeating, "Dina is going to kill me, Dina is going to kill me," which I suppose does sound a bit dark when you first hear it. However, Rebecca was left in charge of a 6-year-old boy who's not her son, who was then really badly injured himself, And of course she's thinking his mum is gonna murder me. Now Rebecca said that she did CPR on Max as soon as she found him, which actually doesn't match up with how she said that he called out for Ocean when she first found him, because that would make you think that he is breathing and lucid and therefore doesn't need CPR. However, Rebecca did say that she did do CPR, so whether it was after Max maybe lost consciousness, I'm not sure. She said she did it. However, doctors say that Max actually went up to 30 minutes without any oxygen, and he had severe brain damage from this. Jonah arrived home just as his son was being put into an ambulance, and Max was taken to the nearest hospital. Max was severely injured. He had broken facial bones and a spinal cord injury, and when he was at the hospital he was placed in a medically induced coma. Max actually died from his injuries on July 16th, 2011, so just a few days later, and the main cause of death was brain damage due to asphyxiation. The general consensus, and what I think the police actually came to the conclusion of, is that Max was in the second floor hallway playing on his scooter, and he maybe slipped on a soccer ball or he just tripped over, and he ended up falling over the banister with his scooter in his hand. With Max in ICU, Rebecca was made responsible of picking up Dina's twin sister Nina from the airport. Nina's reported that whilst she was in the car with Rebecca, Nina kept asking questions. What happened to Max? How did it happen? Is he okay? And Rebecca was very evasive about all of these questions. She wouldn't quite look Nina in the eye and she wouldn't answer any of the questions. And again, I think this looks very suspicious, but I can understand that Rebecca was obviously very upset about what happened. She perhaps felt responsible and was maybe not in a very solid state of mind and just didn't answer the questions probably as she should have done. The next day was July the 12th, and Rebecca went to the airport to drop off Zena so Zena could fly back to Missouri to be with their family. And Rebecca also picked up Jonah's brother Adam from the airport as well. Adam wanted to be there to support his brother, and that night Adam, Jonah and Rebecca all went out for dinner. And Adam said that Rebecca was very, very quiet at dinner. She seemed very worried and didn't really say much. And Adam said that he actually felt really sorry for her. That night after the dinner, Jonah goes back to the hospital where he's staying at the Ronald McDonald house so he can be near his son at all times and be by his bedside. Rebecca and Adam head back to the Spreckles mansion. Rebecca stays in the main house in the 27-room mansion on her own, and Adam says that he's going to stay in the guest house. The next morning, Adam gets up about 6:40 a.m. and decides to head to the main house to get himself a cup of coffee. As he's walking over to the house, he finds the dead body of Rebecca Zahau, and it appeared to be a clear-cut suicide. Rebecca was hanging from a second-story balcony outside the house by a red rope around her neck. However, there were also some very strange circumstances. Her feet and hands were bound behind her neck, and she had a blue long-sleeve t-shirt wrapped around her neck, with the sleeves tied into a double knot and stuffed into her mouth as a gag. 911 received a call from Adam at 6:48 a.m. He said on the phone, "I've got a girl, hung herself, same place you got the kid yesterday." And of course paramedics hadn't got the kids yesterday, it was actually 2 days before that Max had been injured, but I'm guessing that maybe Adam didn't know the exact address of the mansion and so had to explain to them in a way that they would know where it is. Upon discovering the body, Adam goes into the kitchen and pulls out a kitchen knife. He then drags over a table to under her body and cuts her down and tries to administer CPR. However, she was long dead and rigor mortis had already begun to set in on her body. On the 911 call, Adam could be heard frantically shouting, "Are you alive? Are you alive?" And of course, she wasn't. Of course, the paramedics arrived and there wasn't anything they could do. They left her body lying out in the sun for 12 hours before the medical examiner arrived. A lot of people have criticised this as a move because this is the middle of July in California and it was intense heat, and it's really not good to leave a body lying out in intense heat for 12 hours before the medical examiner arrives, because by the time the medical examiner arrived, they say that a lot of the evidence could have been destroyed. He found that her injuries were consistent with long drop hanging, which is a hanging of 6 feet or more. He also estimated that she died about 3 a.m. that morning. However, there were also lots of cuts across her body and she did have some head trauma, and he explained this as when she went over the balcony, she probably hit her head because it was likely that she went over the balcony head first. So maybe she hit her head on the balcony as she went down. And there were also lots of plants around the balcony, and he said that scratches could have just been from her hitting the plants on the way down. The police began to look further into her death and got search warrants so they could look at her cell phone records. In her phone records, they could see that at 10:48 p.m. Nina Romero had sent her a text saying that she wanted to talk to Rebecca to discuss in more detail what had happened to Max. and Rebecca had read this text but she hadn't replied to it. At 12:50 a.m. there was a voicemail that had been listened to and deleted, and the police had never been able to get hold of this deleted voicemail. However, Jonah himself has said that he left Rebecca a voicemail about this time saying that Max's condition had worsened and he probably wasn't going to make it. A lot of people really zoned in on the fact that Rebecca had deleted this voicemail. Personally, I didn't find it that weird that she deleted it when I read about it. I know that when I receive a text I don't want or don't like to read, or if I get a voicemail that I don't want to hear, I will just delete it so I can sort of like not have to worry about it again. But let me know if you think that's a strange thing to do, to get this voicemail then delete it. Maybe she's just one of these people who immediately deleted voicemails after she got them. They do exist. Police believe that Rebecca's guilt from Max's fall combined with this kind of threatening, or she would have probably perceived as threatening, text from Nina Romero and the voicemail saying that Max probably wasn't going to make it. The police think that Rebecca just couldn't handle the guilt and decided to kill herself. However, Rebecca's family have said that there is no way that Rebecca would have killed herself because she was a Christian, she was from Burma, and in Burma suicide is a massive, massive no-no, and Rebecca would have believed that anybody who killed themselves would go to hell. Unless that's what Rebecca wanted to happen, maybe as a penance for what she felt she had done wrong. So Rebecca's family, particularly her sisters, believe that their sister's death was just brushed off as a suicide and it wasn't properly looked into when it could have been a murder. In the second story bedroom that the balcony belonged to, police found the rope tied to the foot of a bed. They found knives, black paint and paintbrushes and a very cryptic message painted on the door. The message read, "She saved him, can you save her?" Police took this as a kind of suicide note. To me, this doesn't read as a suicide note. To me, this is a request. Can you save her? And nobody knows what it means. I feel like if it was intended as a suicide note, it would have read something along the lines of, "I'm sorry," something like that, not this weird cryptic message, and nobody knows what it means. Now, Rebecca was incredibly artistic and she loved to paint, so her having black paint and paintbrushes wasn't a strange thing. They would have belonged to her. However, she would sign all of her paintings with her own name, and her siblings argued that the writing on the door did not match the writing on the painting. Handwriting experts did look at it, but they said that because it was all written in block capitals, it was very hard to distinguish whether it was Rebecca's writing or not. Now, I do have a little theory of my own about this suicide note, but we'll get to that in the theory section of this video. Max's family have always said that Rebecca's death kind of shadowed Max's death, and nobody really cared about Max dying once Rebecca had been found dead because it was under such weird circumstances. But like I said, Max died just a couple of days later on July 16th. On July 26th, 10 days after his death, Max's death was ruled as an accident. However, the trauma doctor that cared for Max stated that he didn't believe Max's injuries were consistent with that of a fall. He had experienced cardiac arrest and brain swelling, and the trauma doctor actually said that it was more consistent with suffocation than a fall. And in regards to Rebecca's death, like I said, her family have refused to accept that it was suicide. One of their main arguments have been the bindings that she was found in. She was found with her hands and feet bound behind her back. They've said that it would have been impossible for Rebecca to tie herself in this way. However, the sheriff's office did recreate the bindings many times. They came to the conclusion that it was totally possible for her to bind herself in this way. And also, one of the main facts in their investigation was the fact that basically the way she was bound, there would have been a loose rope at the end which she could pull to tighten the bindings if she wished to. And this was actually found in Rebecca's hand, apparently, when her body was found. A couple of people have said that this can't be possible because Adam would have cut her down and her body would have fallen, and it's likely that her hand would have let go of the rope. However, the rigor mortis had set in, so she would have been stiff and likely the rope would have stayed in her hand. Over the years, there have been many reportings of people binding themselves, usually just the hands, never usually the feet too. But they do this to stop themselves changing their minds, as once they've 100% made their mind up they're going to kill themselves, and therefore they bind their hands to make sure that they can't change their minds last minute. There were also footprints on the balcony, and when Rebecca was found she did have dirty feet, and investigators have said that the footprints on the balcony are consistent with that of somebody who's bound their feet together. The big question here is, are Max and Rebecca's deaths related? Did somebody harm them both, or did Rebecca just kill herself because of the guilt she felt over Max? And also, was Rebecca's death a suicide? Of course, the most obvious theory here is that Max died in a freak accident. He was playing in the hallway and happened to go over the banister and ended up injuring himself. And Rebecca couldn't deal with the guilt. She had been left in charge of looking after Max and took her eye off him, and he ended up dying from his injury. She just couldn't handle the guilt, and after receiving a text from Nina asking to talk about the details, and after receiving the voicemail from Jonah saying that Max probably wasn't going to survive, she made a decision there and then, and she killed herself. Now, we don't know the mental state that Rebecca was in prior to her death. There's a big possibility that she was already struggling with her mental health, and this was kind of the cherry on top of the cake. Rebecca also probably knew that there were going to be a lot of questions thrown at her, questions that she probably didn't have the answer to, and she just didn't know what to do and panicked. For example, when paramedics arrived, the scooter was by Max's leg. However, her younger sister Zena said in police questioning that when she first saw Max's body, the scooter wasn't there. So maybe Rebecca just knew that she had got herself into a hole and didn't know how to get out of it. Now, it's important to say right out that Jonah was never ever a suspect in Rebecca's death. CCTV at the hospital has him at Max's bedside the entire time, so he was never a suspect, and also the same with his ex-wife Dina. However, later on, when Dina was asking Jonah about why she thinks that Rebecca could have killed herself, apparently Jonah mimed stabbing himself in the stomach and said Asian honour, which, considering your girlfriend of 2 years has just killed herself, seems a very strange thing to say. An obvious suspect here is Adam Shacknai, Jonah's brother, the one who was staying in the guest house and the one who found Rebecca's body. Now, he has done polygraph tests, he's had DNA taken, and the only DNA found at the scene is the DNA of Rebecca. There's no other suspects, and there's nothing here to suggest that it was murder, apart from the very strange circumstances. There's theories that maybe he approached her asking about Max's death and she got scared, maybe things transpired and she ended up getting injured, and then he created this whole elaborate scene to make it look like she had killed herself and to cover up the injuries that he had caused her. And of course, this is just pure speculation because he has never really been considered a suspect by the police, especially when Rebecca's death has been deemed a suicide. There have been rumours of a contract killing. Maybe the Shacknai family took out a hit on Rebecca. In their grief, they were so angry and so upset, they blamed her, and so they hired somebody to kill her. But you've got to bear in mind there was only 40 hours between the deaths of Max and Rebecca. Things probably wouldn't move that fast, and also I don't think the Shacknai's number one priority would have been to take out a hit on Rebecca in this case. Their number one priority was looking after Max. But of course they would have had the money and probably the means to do this if they wanted to. And also that just seems very strange to do. At this point they didn't think she had harmed Max, they just thought he had fallen over the banister in a freak accident. I think it was only after Max's death that the doctor told them that it seemed like Max had been suffocated and the injuries weren't consistent with a fall. One big reason that people don't believe that Rebecca's suicide was a suicide is that it seems way too complicated and way too elaborate to be a suicide. Why the nudity, why the bindings, why the gag? It just all seemed very, very strange. I think it can be explained. The nudity was because she was ashamed of herself and so wanted to shame herself in death, maybe. The bindings were so that she couldn't change her mind and try to escape from the hanging. And the gag is possibly so that she wouldn't scream out and maybe Adam would hear her. Why is it so cryptic and what does it mean? To me, the best thing I could take from it is that maybe Rebecca believed if she sacrificed herself, maybe this sacrifice would save Max in a way. She was very spiritual, she was a Christian, so maybe she believed the world worked this way. Or perhaps it was referring to Zena. Maybe Rebecca wasn't the one who found Max's body and it was actually Zena, and to save Zena from having to answer all of the police's questions, she covered up for her. I think something that's very likely in this case is maybe Zena wasn't in the shower when Max fell, and maybe Zena and Max were playing together. And although Zena was older, she was 13 years old, she was probably still at the age where she would enjoy playing with children in that way. So maybe they were playing in the hallway and Max got injured, they were playing too roughly, and Max ended up going over the banister. And Rebecca, trying to protect her younger sister, took the fall and said that neither of them were there. She lied to the police. She placed the scooter by Max's legs to make it look like he had fallen over with his scooter. I think this would explain why Rebecca was so evasive when it came to questions about Max's death. It would explain why she felt so guilty as well. But then again, at the same time, Zena was only 13 years old, and I think it's possible she would have cracked at some point and said something to someone about what had happened. As for Max's death, Dina herself hired a private investigator to look into his fall, and the private investigator came back with many findings. He said that because of the thick pile carpet in the hallway, it's unlikely that Max would have got up enough speed to injure himself and fall over the banister. And he also said that Max's centre of gravity would have been too low for him to easily go over the banister. It was also this private investigator that realised that Max had no cuts on his hands from reaching and grabbing the chandelier on his way down. Now let me know what you think is most likely in this case. I'm inclined to believe that Max's death was an accident and Rebecca couldn't handle the guilt. I think I would probably feel the same in that kind of situation. You feel lost, you feel like there's no way out, and in a moment you just think, I can't do this anymore. But there are so many theories, so definitely let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, make sure you give it a thumbs up, just let me know that you did, and I will see you in my next video. Bye guys.